Good morning, Phil Guinois and Mike Watkins with the ENO Business Podcast, and this is January 29th, 2024. Almost went back a decade or two, 19. So this is our third podcast, and thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about consistency, and we're going to talk about consistency and what that means in your business and in networking. So, Micah, you had a couple of thoughts on that. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so, consistency is probably the most important thing when it comes to, one, building our businesses and or any endeavor that we tackle on in life itself, right? Let's say we wanted to work out. Hey, all right, I'm out of shape. I want to get back into shape. What am I going to have to do? Well, one, you're going to have to develop, a consistent routine, right? You're going to, I should probably schedule out to regularly attend a gym or, go into my garage or whatever it is that I got to do to start making the habits. So the consistency is essentially us creating the new habits for what we want to create later on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, how many times do people think, hey, I've got this idea, I'm going to do this, or we'll just stay on working out, right? Hey, I want to get in shape, and they start it, and they do it about 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're like, they start making justifications of why they're not going to continue to do that at that time. They might cut it short a little bit. I'm pressed on time. I'm gonna do 30 minutes as opposed to an hour.
So you're saying, today's the 29th of January. You said 2 weeks, starting of the year. So most people have actually stopped on a lot of their New Year's resolution when it comes to getting healthy, getting in shape, and all of that stuff, right?
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
You know better than I. You've got all the stats on that. However, so when we're not consistent, right, are we going to get the results that we're looking for?
Absolutely not.
No, well, we had an opportunity today, and just inconsistency in itself. Like, our partner Jack is not here; he wasn't feeling well, and we said, "Well, we committed to this time block to have these conversations and put this information out for our members and to create the content, for anyone who wants to hear it." Well, we need to stay consistent with that. So there was an opportunity there. Well, we could either divert and do something different, or we can stay consistent.
And that's a great thought that you just shared, because there's a post of the inconsistent ladder and the consistent ladder that I just saw recently on Facebook. And the inconsistent ladder is jumps by, 50 steps, 100 steps, or the climbing of the ladder. And the consistent ladder is small little 10. It's a 10-step. It's a small step at a time, and it makes it much easier to stay on track in any area of your life, your business, your health, whatever it might be. And, that big steps is easy to get disenfranchised, so to speak, when it's not showing up the way you want it. However, if you just had stuck to the smaller goals, one on top of the other, And, Micah, you're fairly new to business and networking in the last 4 years or so. And so, what was it looking like for you when you first started networking in the business community and finding networking groups and the consistency for you?
Well, for me, it was, I need to meet people. And I need to develop as many relationships as I quickly can. So it was, I need to be at all of these events. And it wasn't, I simply put it in my calendar. The awesome thing about a calendar is you can look at it and be like, where am I supposed to be today? Oh, my calendar tells me everywhere where I'm supposed to be at any given point. That's awesome. I don't even have to think about it. The only time I think about it is when I'm booking the calendar, 2 weeks out, right? So I got really consistent at, one, booking my calendar, booking my time. and showing up to events. So how many, there were tons of events that I would go to, and you'd see one person one week and then you wouldn't see them for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden they'd show back up again. And I'm like, well, and then they'd pop in for a week and then you wouldn't see them again. And I was like, what are you doing? Is that creating what you're looking for? Most likely not. Because when you're in front of people and you're talking to people and now you're top of mind.
Yeah. Well, and there's a concept, and we'll kind of expand on this. There's a concept out there in networking called VCP, visibility, credibility, and profitability. And at the very beginning of it, you have to be visible, and that just means you have to show up at whatever it is, whether it's the one group that you join, or you're like when you first started networking, you were visiting as many groups as you could possibly get to because you were new here into town. You didn't know anybody. And so, just that visibility is so important. And I love the other thing that you said is, with it in your calendar, now you know where you need to be, right? And when you lock in and you find a good group or a couple of groups that you want to network in that fit for you, I think the important thing is when you get it into your calendar, to then not look at it as a, quote, obligation, but to actually look at that as this group of people that I'm going to be with every, Wednesday or every month, once a month, whatever that is. That's if you treated that time like that was your best client, the overall organization, right? The group of people that show up. If your best client said, "Hey, Micah, we need you at our office on Wednesdays at X time every week, would you show up?" They're your best client.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another thing too that I wanted to touch on this, and it just goes to show the importance of our words and how many times do people look at their calendar and be like, "Oh man, I have to do this and I have to do that." Well, what if they change that word "have" to "get"?
Yep. I get to do something.
I get to do this. Oh, I get to do that. And you're like, all of a sudden, that completely changes the environment that you're operating in and the mindset that you're operating from. Right? Yeah. So now it's not this obligation. It's an obligation in the sense that you committed to it. So do it. You committed to it. Be consistent in your word. Right? However, be consistent in the words that you choose when we're talking about things that we're doing. And now we get to do this podcast every Monday, right? And how awesome is that?
Yeah. And, it's interesting. So I've got to do this, or I get to do this, or I have to do this. There's a heaviness with a have to. I've got to do this. But as soon as, and I could see it in you, just as you said, I get to do this, there was a lightness, like the energy was different, almost as if a kid gets to go outside and play. That it was that kind of a lightness and an energy that literally showed right up here in the podcast room with us today when you said, I get to do this.
Absolutely. And how many times are people not doing that consistently in their everyday life? So I think, we're talking about consistency and get consistent with the words that we choose. Those words, those things have tremendous amount of power. And I think people overlook how much power those words actually have. So if we get consistent with the language that we're using, well, again, we're going to create on purpose. We're going to create what we're looking for. We're going to create the consistent environment that we want to be in and operate from. And it's incredibly powerful.
Well, and it kind of goes back to the last two podcasts where we've talked about, creating an environment, right? And, when it comes to the words, yes, they're very important, and they literally create the emotions and the feelings we have. However, the default for most of us, and even people that have personal development underneath their belt, sometimes the default is a very strong pull to, those words that are just a part of, the programming that we have. So, my invitation to people is look at where you're at and who you're with. If you want to really work on choosing your words carefully, and you'll probably find an environment like ENO and the personal development, the empowerment training that we do that literally helps you begin to vocalize those kind of words. And you may even look around in the communities that you're in right now, and you may say, wow, there's something different about that guy or that gal. I don't know what it is, but I can almost bet you it has to do with how they speak that attracts you, or that there's something different about that. Find out what they know. Get next to them, get into a relationship with them. That's somebody you can learn from.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, you look at those people and say, okay, well, how did they get there? Well, they got there by being consistently doing what they needed to do to improve and grow themselves. Right, so there's I hear people throw this book out there all the time. Oh, fantastic read and all that, and it's a great book, Atomic Habits. When I run across people that have read it, like, awesome. Yeah, it's a great book. Tremendous power in there. Lots of great tips. Are you living it? Or did you just read it? How many people are simply reading it and then they get the content in there and then they're not implementing or doing or living what the lessons that it taught you? So if you read a book and you're not going to implement what it taught you, did you get anything out of it?
No. And the reality of it is, even if you read it, you probably have an intention to implement a whole bunch. However, what actually gets implemented is a very small amount over time as you get distance from the reading of the book.
Yeah. So, I heard this from a very accomplished man. And I don't remember where it came from. It very well might have been from Atomic Habits, but this one stuck out to me as, this is something I could wrap my brain around. Consistency. Be consistent. And what does that mean? Well, it means find a way to improve yourself 1% a day. 1%. We're not looking at 10, we're not looking at 20%. No, all we need to do is do 1% better than we did yesterday, which means holy smokes, that's incredibly doable. That could be one extra call, or maybe that's, making another connection at a networking meeting, or whatever it is.
Another lap around the block on your walk.
Or, one more rep. You're adding on one extra rep to your workout routine. Whatever that is, that's that 1%. So that 1%, now, if you do that consistently for a whole year, that means that you would have grown 37%. How many people out there in the world would love to see 37% return on their time invested in whatever it was that they were doing? So if it's 37% better in their business, well, holy smokes, that sounds awesome. That probably is resulting in income, right? What about 37% over a span of a year in your physical body? Well, for most people, that's going to be total transformation.
Yeah.
For a lot of people out there, total transformation, 37% growth, that's tremendous. I mean, that's, you're closer to 50%, at 37. So that's really powerful. So that really stuck with me. Great. Awesome. How am I going to implement that? How do I do 1% better every day? And then how do you live it consistently? Now that's the trick. That's the key. You got to be consistent with it. It not, faltering and hey, look, we're all going to have bad days. Get back up, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, tie those shoes, and keep going. You can still make up, even if one bad day is not going to make or break you, especially when you're looking to just create a tick up 1% better each day.
Well, that tick up, that 1% better, that's kind of the same thing in your world, in your work world, as compound interest, right?
Absolutely.
It's a little bit. It's so minute you don't even see it day to day. However, look back a year later or 5 years later or 10 years later, and it's made a massive difference. One of the things that in the coaching that we're doing right now with some of our people in our challenge, one of the things that I've been sharing with my group is one of the strongest scarcity mindsets is the all or nothing mindset. And yet a lot of times people will think that that's actually a powerful thing. Well, if I can't do my workout, then I'm not going to do any because I'm going to give it 100%. But the flip to that is if they were only able, like you said earlier, I don't have an hour to do a workout today. However, I can get in 30 minutes today. It's that consistency. And the challenge, I think, is that when we don't take that little bit of progress and we back off because I don't have the time today or whatever it might be, I'm not feeling well today. If we do that too much, then we want to make those 20 and 30% gains, and that becomes defeating for us because it's not sustainable.
No, because you're stretching yourself too far.
Yeah,
it's like think of it like this. We all own homes or houses, apartments, whatever, right? We've all got that going on, and if we don't want to live in a pigsty, we need to keep it clean, right? How many people out there let their house, go, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, spring cleaning, because that's right around the corner, right? Or, the rest of the world, not here in Arizona. I mean, is there even a spring? It skips right into summer, right? But the rest of the world out there, it's colder, and the second that it starts warming up, people are like, all right, we got to clean the house. Now they're deep cleaning everything, and it's exhausting. How many? I got to block this weekend off because I'm going to do spring cleaning and completely clean the whole house, wipe down the baseboards, all the cleaning up dust bunnies off of nooks and crannies and all that stuff.
Little cobwebs up in the corner.
So now let's look at the antithesis of that, right? Which would be, what if you consistently had a chart, where you're like...
You sound like an ex-restaurant guy, probably a side work chart.
Yeah, it's like, hey, on Mondays, we're going to clean this. And on Tuesdays, we're going to clean this. And on this, and then, and then there's once a month. Once a month, this needs to get done, right? Oh, once a month, we need to clean the fan blades, right? So now all of a sudden, if we start breaking things down into smaller sections, it's very manageable. And here's the thing. You miss one Monday, it's not going to make or break you.
Right.
Right? Okay, yeah. Well, because it's regularly getting cleaned. So if it goes 2 weeks as opposed to a week, normally it's not going to be a big issue. Now, the problem is when then all of a sudden it turns into 2 weeks, it turns into 3 weeks, and now it becomes the monthly chore. Now we see it, right? Now we see, it's getting dirty and it's still not clean. And then, I'll tackle it next month. And then the next month. And then, this one compounded into, oh my goodness, now I've got to clean the whole house. I've slacked off. I haven't been consistent. And then people get themselves into trouble and they're just and overwhelmed. It's the overwhelming part that I think a lot of people don't realize. They don't think about it. And then they're like, oh, wait a second. Hold on. Had I just done this? Oh.
Yeah.
So wait, that requires work. What? Oh, man.
So let's talk about, let's kind of shift in consistency in business networking. So, all of us went through the pandemic of 2020 and really into 2021. And, we were doing live events regularly, multiple events a month. And then, we got shut down in March of 2020 because we could not do anything in person. So let's talk about what that looked like I say was we fast forward, and by the time we were really able to open back up to doing live events, which was September of 2020, ENO went back to holding live events and never looked back. So we've not done one online networking event since September of 2020. What did that look like, Micah? You were a new member into ENO at that point in time. What did it look like for us?
Well, let's be honest. Zoom networking was that sucked.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, there wasn't the energy, right? Now, being a member back then and still really new in all of that and really learning how to network, I thought it was great, being able to get back into, in-person events and I flourished on it, right? I was consistently there. There were still a lot of people with fear and uncertainty, and they just didn't know what to expect. However, the live events, and it goes for a lot of other groups too. There were other groups that were still on Zoom, and I was doing those as well. However, the live events are what you could feel the energy. You were able to connect with people better. Because here's the thing about business networking. It's not what's happening at the meeting. It's meeting with the people before and after the meeting.
Yeah. Well, and in the beginning, and it was really all of probably 2020, from September through the end of the year and really into probably the first half of 2021. We did our lunches every week. We had one up at kind of the Scottsdale North area, and then we had one down in the Chandler area, and we were consistent. We were there every single week, even the weeks that there was 4 of us that showed up. Me and Jack and typically you and maybe one other member would show up. And then other weeks, we might have 8 or 10, 12 people show up, sometimes 15 or 20. So while the attendance was inconsistent in what we could expect, we were consistent in that we kept holding those, knowing that we just had to keep moving forward and people will show up. Kind of like the Field of Dreams, right? Build it and they will come.
Yep. There's a lot of truth in that. I mean, for you out there listening, think to some aspect of your life where you wanted to attract something and you had to work towards whatever it was that you were building, right? It could have been a career. It could have been, maybe you were literally physically building something, right? And that, it was going to attract you, or you were building your business, right? However, once you got it built, then all of a sudden, people start showing up. And again, it comes back to the consistency. You're wanting to build something. Even here, we're talking about business right now, right? How many people, I want to have this business. Oh, yeah, I want to do this and this and this and that. Awesome. Or what are you going to consistently do to build it? What does that look like? How are you going to get there, right? I think a lot of people don't even think that through. They're just like, well, I want to have this. Awesome. Well, that's the starting point. Now, what are the steps going to be? And whatever those steps are, they better be consistent. Otherwise, it's going to look really ugly. And you're going to get discouraged and overwhelmed and this isn't working. And how many times do people give up on themselves and or their business that they're working on because they didn't see the results right away?
All the time. And then they get re-engaged and they get super excited again for whatever reason, right? And then they're trying to gain 20 and 30%, and then they hit the wall again, and it doesn't happen that way. And then they back off. So, one of the things in being consistent, and this is something that you were really good at. So, after the pandemic and we were able to open up through the half of 2020 and into 2021 is skill set, right? So being consistent actually allows you to develop your skill as a networker. And, so you have to show up on a consistent basis to get good at networking with people. And it's not just a few people. What you really want to get good at is understanding the diverse individuals out there, because you're going to have to deal with different personalities, different types of people, whether they're a controller or they're a promoter or they're a supporter or they're an analyst, all of the different things, right? And inside of that, so you got the 4 quadrants of personalities, but then you got 1,000 different aspects of that, depending upon who you're dealing with that sits in that happen to be quadrant, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to learn how to develop that skill set of being able to engage with people. And, so one of the things that you were good at, Micah, is you kept showing up. And then you mentioned it earlier as well. You were maximizing your time. So it wasn't just, I'm going to hit this networking event from, 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the afternoon or whatever the time was. What were you doing before the networking event, and what were you doing after the networking event?
Well, for me, I consistently show up early to all events, and I specifically block time after events so that I can talk with people. So a lot of it was, being consistently early so that whoever else was early, great, I could strike up a conversation with them and continue to build the relationship. Same thing with afterwards. So how many people go to networking events and then they bolt right away? That's great. You're scheduling your time accordingly. However, in networking, business networking, the connections happen before and after the meeting. I learned that very early.
Well, that ties into what we mentioned earlier was the visibility, right? So visibility is showing up, and it's the amount of time that you're there, right? Are you just sliding in the door at the very last moment to the start of the meeting, or maybe a little bit late? And, are you bolting out the door, like you said, right at the end? And then your visibility leads to credibility, and that's what you were building, and that's what everybody needs to build is that credibility. Just because you show up consistently, you've got to now start building the credibility and having those conversations. And one of the other things that you were really good at is you also began to schedule specific time to meet with people on a one-on-one afterwards, once you'd connected with them a time or two, and you were able to then get to know them on a deeper level, not only as an individual, but their business. So that begins to build the credibility piece of being consistent.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and again, it goes back to just, regular old calendar and time blocking, but maximize your time. You don't want to be driving all over God's creation, trying to meet with people. Be efficient, maximize the time, be efficient. And so, I sit here and think, here we are, we're talking about consistency. And what is, what are some of the things that we have to do as business networkers? We've got to invest some time in getting to know other people, right? And so one of the things I don't don't even know if I shared this with you yet. However, I think it was about December. Maybe it was November, December of last year, 2023. I had an epiphany. And I told myself, all right, this is how you're going to create what you want to create. And I made it a pact with myself to pour into others as much as I possibly could every time I'm with whoever it is. So if I'm with somebody and I'm there, my obligation that I made with myself is to pour as much value into that person as possible. How much value can I give them at all times? So when I started doing that, now all of a sudden the conversations got deeper.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, and then all of a sudden, like even this year, January, I've had some client meetings where they're like, holy smokes, I want to meet with you monthly. What you provided for me was absolutely amazing. And this is the feedback that I'm getting. And all it is I'm consistently thinking of what value can I bring to this person? What can I pour into them to be of the utmost value for them, and be provide them. Hey, they're giving me their time. Let me pour into you.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's right there in my brain is, and this is we see this a lot. You didn't come to that with what I call sales breath, right? Sales breath is, I'm going to meet with you and I'm going to try to, sell you every step of the way. Every time I meet with you, it's about me. It's about me. It's about what I've got to offer. And yes, you're going to get in a little bit. However, so many people have what I call sales breath. The first time they meet with somebody, they're not even, it's just, I booked a one-to-one and it turns into, by design, immediately into a sales presentation. And that just doesn't, are you going to get a few sales out of it? Absolutely. You're going to get some business out of it. However, you're also going to get a reputation, because your reputation precedes you one way or the other. And, when you're pouring into people and you're giving to them, they're going to want to give back to you. And some of them can and some of them can't, right? At least at the time being. However, the energy that you put out, it's going to come back to you somehow. It's called the law of reciprocity, right? Mm-hmm. You put that into somebody over here, that guy, that you met with, he's like, holy smokes, I want to meet with you once a month. That was an immediate return on investment. However, you might get the same thing with someone else, and it may come in a completely different area that you can't even tie the two things together. However, it came from what you were putting out into the world. Like energy attracts like energy. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, the other thing too, you brought up the law of I can never say that word.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, reciprocity. I can never say that word. So you mentioned that, and it makes me think of the book The Go-Giver. So when I first got into this industry and doing everything that I'm doing outside of ENO, one of the leaders of my organization, mentors, if you will, he recommended me check out the book. And one of the things he did was he listened to it every day for like months. And then it turned into, he would listen to it on Mondays. Every Monday, while he was driving to work, you can get used to, you can turn the speed up. I think I listen at like 2x. So, some of these books, I can get the information real quick. Now, if I've heard them several times, I can anticipate it. It's making it on the forefront of my mind, right? So I did that. I just, hey, this guy's successful. This is what he did. All right, I'll do that. And I had the willingness and acceptance to say, all right, sweet, just tell me what I got to do and I'll do that. right? So that's what I did. I started listening to that book essentially daily. And then it got to a point where I was, my Mondays, I would, have windshield time, pop it on, and it would set the tone for my week. And I consistently do that. And then now I still consistently listen to it. Not as frequently because it just the laws and the principles of that book are ingrained in my head now. It's part of my habitual habits. It's part of what I am. It's part of who I am now. It's how I operate. But, it was being consistent in listening to it to, put that information into my brain. Well, this is how I want to operate. And it was a great book as well. When it comes down to business networking, what great principles to follow by, right? And so now all of a sudden, by doing that and being consistent with that, it completely changed the dynamic, the environment for me, and how I was operating towards others. It really, really, I just look at that example right there and I'm like, oh, that's what we're talking about.
And so I'm sitting here thinking of a couple things. So, Micah, that, in my story, I've shared that I've dropped 100 to 110 pounds and I've kept it off for 15 years. And there obviously that took a lot of consistency to get there, and even more consistency to actually keep it off for 15 years now.
Well, it's easy to get fat.
Yeah, and it's easy to, and the reality is, it is actually fairly easy to lose 10 or 15 pounds pretty quickly. However, it's a yo-yo, right? So as I'm sitting there thinking about that, I think that the other thing for people to understand, our listeners out there, is you are more consistent in your life than you actually think you are. So what I invite everybody to do is look at your life, look at your business, and look for even if it's the smallest thing that you're consistent at. And then, how do you improve upon that? How do you take that consistency of whatever that is, and how do you now create another consistency like that in another area of your life, right? You can just add a little bit. But I believe that people diminish the amount of consistency that they have in their life because they don't see it as a big consistency. But we're not talking about big consistencies here. Big consistencies come from doing the little consistent things in life. And I think they can just take that and go, I'm consistent here. How do I map that consistency into this area of my life that I want to be consistent in? When I started dropping the weight and getting into the condition that I'm in now, and then being an endurance cyclist, riding anywhere between 40 and 70 miles, I looked at how do I take that consistency and map it onto other areas of my life, whether that's business, whether that's my finances. How do I take that skill, that consistency, and just map it onto other areas and improve them? Because once you've got it in one, you don't have to figure it out in another area. You might have to tweak a little something here or there. The basics are always the same in consistency.
Well, Phil, what you said right there is incredibly powerful and valid. If you take it the step further, how does it make you feel?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. How did you feel when you were consistently hitting the gym, dropping the weight? Right now, all of a sudden, you've got you. When we associate the feelings that we're getting from the results that we're looking for, now all of a sudden, ooh, that feels good. I like that.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we can. It's my little hack, right? It's the hack tips. That's how you stay consistent. Oh, how am I feeling about this? Because when look, we operate with this thing, thinking with our heads and all that. Excuse me. And how many of us just get stuck in the logic? Although here, the heart, when we operate from feeling, now all of a sudden that's a whole different ballgame. And I don't know what's happening right now. I feel like I'm losing my voice.
Well, you said you don't have a voice for radio.
Oh, absolutely not. Mr. Raspy over here.
Yeah. So, like for me, it felt good. It felt really good, right? I knew I was making progress. And the interesting thing is, and this shows up everywhere for all of us, is then other people started seeing it, right? And then they would say whatever they would say. And that actually fueled that feeling, right? Of whatever, of accomplishment, of, being proud of what I did, whatever it was, it just fueled it to the next level. And then I could just keep moving. So there is the piece for yourself that you feel good about it. It will show up and others are like, wow, that's amazing. What are you doing? You're looking, in my case, you're looking great. Right. And it just fueled what's next? How can I keep? And it kept me moving down the road, so to speak. So whatever that is, find what that is. Find the feeling that resonates with you and pay attention to that feeling and tap into that feeling. Every time you do that activity of consistency in whatever area of life or business that is.
Oh, absolutely. We're only here for a blip, right? Well, why waste our time on doing stuff that we don't really want to? And, I have to do this, I have to do that. Start living in I got to go do this. I got to go do that. I got to go do a lot of things. And you know what? When I get to do them, man, it sounds awesome and I love it.
Yeah. Awesome. So at the end of the day, Mike, I think we're almost right at an hour, coming up close to an hour. At the end of the day, consistency trumps intensity every single time. In any area of life and business, it's just being consistent. And like you said, adding that 1% that you can do just a little bit more. I always, back when I was running, back in the triathlon days, I would always set a goal for the week. And I remember many times on Monday thinking to myself, don't start in a deficit. Don't start the week in a deficit. So if I had a goal of X number of miles and I wasn't feeling it on a Monday or whatever, it was like, okay, don't be in a deficit. Because once you're in a deficit, it's easy to stay in a deficit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So here, let's not negate the one thing. Whatever it is that we take on, when it's a new endeavor or business or whatever it is, we're going to get into the gym and start working out, it still takes massive action to get that going. So a little bit of that intensity, although it's just massive action. That's what it is. The intensity doesn't need to be ramped up so much. And then it's the consistency from there.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people, they just don't think about that. They're like, okay, well, yeah, to start anything, it's like starting up a train, right? I mean, it takes a massive action, a tremendous amount of energy to get it started. However, once it's rolling, as long as you maintain the consistency, that thing's just smooth riding, right?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where, as human beings, we get stuck is it does take massive action and it does take a lot of energy and even discomfort, right? So if you're going to the gym and trying to get in shape, it's usually physical discomfort. Oh, I hurt here. I didn't even know I had a muscle there, and you did leg day. You can't sit down on the toilet and you can't get up off the toilet, right? Your legs are hurting all the time.
That was me on Friday.
And then, and obviously there's some mental discomfort that goes with that as well, right? And questioning, is this worth it? And when it comes to so many other things than the physical in our business and in other areas in our life, the physical uncomfort shows up first. The mental is harder to find sometimes, right, for people. And I think that's they quit when it's uncomfortable, and they just don't go long enough to get past that uncomfortable, the pain, and then to where, as you said, whether it's a train or it's a vehicle that we're pushing from, start, where you got to pop the clutch and get it to start. I got to put in a ton of energy to push that vehicle and get it rolling. But once it's rolling, I can keep it rolling fairly easily. And that showed up in my life as certainly in the physical side of my life.
Yeah. Well, and you touch base on how many people end up giving up? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've had plenty of times where I was just like, oh God, I'm ready to give up right now. I've had those struggles, especially building the business that I've been building, and there were times where I was like, oh, I just want to throw in the towel. However, I look back and go, holy smokes, wait a second, where did you come from? I look back and I see I am not the same person I was 4 years ago. And that is, it's like, holy smokes, there's something to be said for that. And do I really want to give up all that? No. All right. And I pull myself back in. But there's been plenty of times in so many aspects of my life where you're just like, oh, this is, oh my goodness. And I'm ready, you're just ready to throw in the towel. But then it's like, wait a second, you're in the discomfort phase, and growth happens in discomfort, right? When we expand, that happens only when we're uncomfortable. So, I'd listen to a lot of Steve Harvey. And one of the biggest things that he says is if you like success, you better get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you do not like being uncomfortable, then do not pursue success.
True.
It's like, holy smokes, that stuck with me. I heard that and I'm like, damn, he's got some valid points. You listen to Steve Harvey. I mean, that guy, there's some powerful little one-liners that he's got. And there's a reason why he's on 7 different TV programs, flip on the channel any given time of the day, and you probably run across Steve Harvey, right?
And he didn't get there without his challenges. He's lost a lot along the way.
Oh, he's
rebuilt.
He's had to rebuild himself 3 separate times.
I saw a saying, you've come too far to stop now. Right? Yeah. And that's where you were at. You look back at whatever that was you mentioned just a minute ago and were like, holy smokes, look where I was 4 years ago. I'm not even the physical Micah is the same, but there's a whole lot of other that's different about Micah, and you'd come too far to just go that far.
Well, yeah. I mean, hell, I have regular conversations with a mentor, colleague, if you will, really look up to him. And he's an older gentleman, and, he's helped me through a lot. And sometimes it's the conversation, right? And I've had the conversation with him regularly, and he's like, look at what you're doing, dude. You are not the same guy. You were operating on a completely different level. And I'm like, oh, I got to sit back and, oh, yeah, you're right. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
It's awesome, though. I mean, the feeling that you get from that and being consistent in what you're doing and seeing where now it's like I can see where ENO's going. I see where I'm going, I see what I want my future to be. And is there going to be some uncomfort getting there? Oh, absolutely. However, if I want that, I'm going to have to do some uncomfortable things.
Yep. There might even be a hairpin turn in the middle of the road that you don't know about.
Yeah. That just is what comes with success and moving forward.
Yeah. So, Maiko, anything else you think we should share with our listeners here before we wrap up today's podcast on consistency?
Well, we'll consistently be doing this every Monday.
Yeah, we'll be back here next Monday.
No, I think like whatever, whoever's listening right now, just stay the course. You set the course, you set out on it. It was your journey that you chose to do whatever it is that you chose to do. Stay the course. Stay the course. If it's not what you want to be doing, then find the course that you want to be doing. Be consistent with it, though. When you start flip-flopping and dancing all over the place because, our attention spans are that of newts, it's like instant gratification is what we're just trained to seek that now, right? However, whatever it is that you chose, be consistent. Show up for yourself. Like I love the challenge that we're doing and being able to coach the challenge. I love it because it gives people that opportunity. It's the mirror right there.
Yeah.
It hey, look, don't give up on yourself. Why would you do that? Because at the end of the day, like, who cares about you? You do.
Yeah. So
why would you give up on you? So whatever you set your mind to it, do it.
And I guess for the guests listening, Micah just said, stay the course. What you're doing, you set the course. And he also said, if you don't, if that course isn't your course, it's not what fills your heart, you might need to change that. However, it did fill your heart at one point in time. You might just be a little bit discouraged. So I would invite you to, look at that and go, have I given it what I need to give it? Before you discount it and move on to something else. Because that's typically what we need to do, right? I mean, I've been in the business I'm at. Literally, yesterday was my 20th year anniversary. And like you, there were times over the years, it was a challenge, right? My mindset, what am I doing? However, I know in my heart that that's where I want to be, and that's what I'm doing, and I chose it for a reason, and it still serves me. So stay true to that. So I just invite everybody, if there's a piece there for you, go back and look and okay, how do I re-inspire that and stay true to the course, even though I might have a challenge right now.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Well, we're going to wrap up. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Jack should be back with us next week. This is Phil Guinois, Micah Watkins with the ENO Business Podcast. And you can find us at enosuccess.com. Also, we have a networking lunch this week on Wednesday, 11:30 to 1 o'clock at the Babbo's Italian restaurant on Talking Stick, just off the 101. Come on out, join us. And also we have some very, very innovative, which we talked about a little bit last week, mastermind groups that are on Thursday afternoons. And we're kicking off actually a new one tomorrow in Mesa, Micah. That's pretty exciting. And I think our Gilbert one will be going probably later this month.
Absolutely. Well, the end of February.
Yes, the end of February. You're right. I'm already in February in my mind.
There we go.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Adios.